So I guess even as you're trying to get that set up, I just want to say that our knowledge and our recommendations are do move and do shift. So we just would like to put the caveat on today's presentation that things may move and shift, and we just need to keep up to date, all of us. All right, thank you. May I have?
Okay, we're
sorry.
good to go.
Are
Sorry
we
about
good?
that.
All right,
Yeah.
great. So, all right, let's start on the next one. Thanks, Max. Thank you. Oh, okay, thanks. So just to give a little bit of a background as to where we are right now, we are, as you can see, shadowed underneath here. Most of the state is now in the purple tier, and we're this little tiny red county in this purple sea. We have been very fortunate so far that our case count is not as bad as perhaps some of the other surrounding counties, and we're hoping to depress this further. Our case count right now is 6.8 per 100,000, and it's adjusted for our tier assignment at 3.4, and we're going to be staying in red, it looks like, for a little bit longer. Our positivity rate, 1.5%, is actually in a lower tier rate, but you always go with the higher tier. Next slide, please. This slide is sort of, I think, the dashboard for our school status page. And so far we've had, as you can see, we've been monitoring over 40,000 kids with over 5,000 staff and 84 open schools. And we've had one case of suspected in-school transmission amongst staff, not staff to student or among the students, but among the staff. And we've had 26 positive students so far and 6 positive staff. And among the students, we've had a few of those have been positive in have been positive and have been participating in youth sports organizations or private clubs outside of the school. So this definitely is going to be definitely affects these particular organizations that are on this call, and I'm sure we'll be seeing more of this as we progress through this pandemic. Next slide. Thank you. So today's agenda includes discussing our Marin County COVID status and community concerns. We're going to discuss a little bit about the public health orders, advisories, and state guidance, and including business regulations, and the Marin County Athletics Guidelines for Safe Sports during COVID is in process. We have a draft coming out. We're also waiting for the state. The state is going to be releasing some information. We've had some good drafts that have been drawn up by the schools team. Kit, did you have an invitation for people to help give comments on the guideline that we're developing?
Yeah, absolutely. So Lisa told me that just to kind of send any input that you guys have that's coming, just send them directly to us. And what we'll do is we'll be able to make those changes as needed. But at the same time, we're primarily right now kind of waiting for the state guidance that should be dropping any day right now. And I know in particular, their schools are waiting because we're supposed to be starting school competition here very soon. So CIF and state are very aware of that. And so I think the state guidance is going to be coming very quickly. And so we're going to be able to make those revisions within our own county guidelines as well.
That's great. Thank you. And these do address things like cohorts, travel and testing, unsafe behaviors, and closures of cohorts in the youth sports world. And we'll also be talking about how to communicate with us with public health. Next slide, please. So just to emphasize the importance of this, you all may have heard about this in Placer County. I believe earlier this month, there was a 2-day basketball tournament, and at least 30 COVID cases came out of that. And some of the players who became positive went on to play in other places. So this is it becomes very difficult to track this down. And there's the responsibility lies actually in several hands on the businesses that that are renting these spaces to these basketball tournaments, the coaches, perhaps not following state guidance, parents, there has been advice given to parents as to in regards to how to, safely, how to protect your family, and would not include sending your children to play in tournaments with other teams, and students themselves. There's a lot of responsibility in various aspects of this particular occurrence of basketball tournament and the resulting fallout. Um, just to also bring it home a little bit more to here in Marin County, we've had schools with a couple of kids positives, but the kids often belong to multiple teams, and it can be very hard to track down these positive kids that play in multiple teams. So it's really helpful to have sort of open communication and coordination, as well as tracking and good documentation of the various cohorts. So for the people who are on your team, if you have their information, how to get a hold of them, as well as knowing what dates they're attending your sports. It's very helpful for us to when we have to go down later and track people down who have been exposed to a positive. I also would like to point out that one of the things we did notice in one of these cases is that carpooling is a very high risk activity. It often happens with sports teams, but it's helpful to cohort your carpool. So just to minimize the risk. And also we do have recommendations for carpooling, making sure that the windows are down, masks are on, and that hand sanitization occurs before and after you enter the car. We'd also like to bring up the point that we've seen some high school athletes playing on club teams have gone out of state, and one of them, one went out of state to play and came back to the county, and we had at least one test positive. We also know about an LA County youth baseball team that went down to Arizona, and 10 people on the team came back positive. So just to remind us about the dangers of out-of-state play and bringing back home COVID to our families and to our other school and cohort members. Next slide, please.
Celia, just to add in, I think one of the things that we're adding to our FAQ, and this is from the state guidance, is just clarifying that at this time, the state guidance indicates that game and tournament play and traveling out of county, out of state for that type of play is not allowed. And that in addition to prohibiting game and tournament play in this county, this also means that a youth living in Marin County or a Marin sports team should not travel to another county or state to participate in a game or tournament. So that'll be, weren't sure that if some folks were not clear about that, but we'll be adding that to the website.
Thank you, Max. And among the recommendations, which I'm sure you all are familiar with, but are worth repeating, are to conduct daily health checks, symptom checks of the coaches and the players, just to make sure that nobody is coming on with symptoms. We do require daily screening before we send kids to our kids to school, and the same should be required on the youth sports clubs. As Max mentioned, high risk activities like out of state play is not permitted, and if it does happen, we would expect that there would be a 14-day quarantine of the team, of all team members, and testing 5 to 7 days after any tournament or travel that occurs, because of the high risk nature of such an exposure and the possibility of spreading it to schoolmates as well as other cohorts that the children may be involved in. Would anybody else like to add something to that? All right. So this you may actually be familiar with this. This was developed by the schools team and it's the Marin County Public Health Protocols on what to do in the school and classroom setting. This is, I don't know if Linda or Sandra, do you all want to comment? We have members of our various teams here, including our schools team. Linda or Sandra, do you want to comment on this particular chart?
This is Basically, this is a protocol that we've created for the use of schools. And basically, it covers the basic scenarios. Somebody has symptoms, somebody is a close contact of someone who tests positive for COVID, someone, a student or staff person tests positive for COVID themselves. And then it provides a list of actions and what sort of communication the family should get. And you can link from there to sample letters, template letters that you can use and alter for your own specific circumstances. If, for example, somebody on the team tests positive and you want to notify all the other families, it provides you a sample letter to use and also a list of the things that you might need to do, contact public health, and that sort of thing. So this will, if you click on the blue parts, it will link to the materials that you need for each of those scenarios.
And remember, you're always free to contact us. We're really happy to help you figure out the infectious period, what you need to do specifically. We're here to offer advice, to partner with you in any way. We're here to help, and questions on notifications and all that sort of thing. That's what we're here for. And we'll leave you with with a way to contact us at the end of this presentation. It's, we're here to partner with you. We're not just saying that this is what you need to do and then disappearing and expecting you to do it on your own. We're happy to help. And we have the next slide, please. So what do we need? What do we need from our youth club sports? There's one of the things that is really important is coaches and testing. So we require that essential workers like teachers be tested once every 2 months. But each program and each school has its own testing policies. Some of the schools are testing more frequently, et cetera, et cetera. And I just want to make you aware that we do have, you can be tested through your own private health insurance, but we also do have resources available through the Marin County Department of Health. We have some sites that you can be tested at for free, and those can be found on our Marin County Public Health webpage. Now, if a parent does call and tell you that you have a positive, that their child is positive and that child has been participating in your sports club or dance studio or whatever, there's certain things that would be necessary and helpful. One of them is to get the contact information for that player and their parent or guardian, and to immediately figure out when that person was, when the case was at your club or dance studio, and get the dates of that, so that you can then call us and we can help you figure out what cohort was exposed to a potentially infectious person and what has to be done. It's important for us to know also the date that the last time the COVID positive person was at your facility or at your club sport event, and also very helpful for us to know if they have other activities or other groups, as well as the schools they're attending, because it's with children, there's often several organizations or other entities that need to be contacted because of possible exposures. So these we can actually help also with a line list, with a list where you can put all your participants' information, and that might be an easier way to manage that information for you. It's called a line list, and we can help you get one, or we can email you one. Next slide, please. For safety guidance, there are bilingual education and resources that are available both through the MCOE as well as through the Marin County Department website, and through the CDP, the California Department of Public Health also has put out various guidances both for youth sports as well as for schools, and there's crossover between the two. There is, we do have recommendations indoors versus outdoors. As you've probably heard, indoors is not as safe as outdoors. Whenever you can conduct whatever sports, calisthenics, or any other kind of training outdoors, it is infinitely safer for everybody involved, though it's still, you still have several precautions with regards to spacing that are necessary, as well as cleaning and disinfecting equipment and that sort of thing. Hand hygiene remains really important. Best is soap and water for 20 seconds, but obviously we have to make do with hand sanitizer sometimes when we don't have easy access to sinks. Physical distancing, at least 6 feet, maybe greater if you're doing heavy exertions outside, is definitely recommended. And the more space you can get, especially during exertion, the better. Face masks are key. They should be worn whenever they can be, unless you have heavy exertion, and then you have to be really careful with the physical spacing. And the environmental cleaning also involves, again, equipment. And I'm just trying to, it would be mainly, I think, equipment and that sort of thing. We also like to remind people to clean surfaces and actually to wash the masks. I think we tend to reuse our masks over and over, and they're supposed to be washed, hopefully on a daily basis. We should have a clean mask each time, and that's something that we need to remind our youth, I think, a lot, including my own children.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Yes.
Just a quick reminder that if the activity is taking place indoors, as it stands right now, they have to be wearing a mask while they're inside.
Yes.
If you're doing an activity that is more cardiovascular strenuous, then I would say take them outside. Get that social distancing, get that 6 feet or more apart. Then they can take those masks off to perform that activity. But if they're inside, they're required right now to have masks on.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that, Kit. Yes, you cannot be indoors and without a mask, no matter. Yes, and if the activity is too strenuous, it must go outdoors.
Sorry, quick question on that. Is there an age requirement for that? Like for all ages, masks?
Yeah, we can, how about at the end, I can pull up the state's youth sports guidance and we can go over that together.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. When you do have somebody who's positive, or if you have questions, really any questions, we're happy to, try to mull them over with you and to offer advice and update our advice as necessary. You can call both the call center as well as email us at the COVID-19 schools at marincounty.org, and we will be sure to get back to you and offer whatever advice that we can. And I think the next slide is questions. And I do see it. We have a question on the group chat. And it says, regarding what you need on slide 8, is the expectation that club coaches, administrators should be collecting tracing data on behalf of the county, or just making referrals to county health services? I think right now what we're thinking is that what we would do is something similar to what the schools do. Is that we would recommend, we would tell you, like, we would help you figure out when the case was infectious, who was exposed, what cohorts were exposed at your business or club. And then you would be responsible for gathering gathering a list of all the names of the kids in that cohort and their contact information. We would like a copy of that, but you would actually be responsible for contacting the families of those children and letting them know that they would need to be quarantined. That would actually be the responsibility of the club, though of course we can provide backup with questions and stuff. And then we would turn over the information ourselves to our contact tracing, to our contact team. But that actually, the initial contact with the recommendation for the quarantine would be through you all, as that cohort is closed down. And we would like among the information we'd like to gather from you is the schools that these children are attending, so that we can make sure that the schools team is aware of this and can make sure that the schools are notified. The other thing would be to tell the parents that they must notify the schools of their children and any other cohorts that they are participating in.
Yeah, and I've got the youth sports guidance here. So, and for many of you who have been sort of following this, initially when we started with the shelter in place back in March or April, Marin, there was no, state guidance at that point. And so we came, thanks to many of you who volunteered to help out to create our Marin specific guidance that was on our Marin Recovers website. And over time, the state has taken a more active leadership role in providing guidance, and then also the blueprint for reopening various sectors. And so now our health order reflects that state leadership in providing the guidance and the data points for reopening or closing different sectors. And so the Marin Recover site just takes you to this state guidance for youth sports. And I think, like either Sally or Kit mentioned in the beginning, you know, the state has been promising for a while to release some updated youth sports guidance. And I think, you know, likely the surge in cases has played some kind of a role in that taking a little longer than expected. But for now, this is the guidance that we're following. And, you know, one of the key things to point out, you know, in here, it talks about, you know, wearing masks indoors. It also, you know, talks about doing conditioning and exercise. You know, Kit may be able to speak to this in more detail, but, you know, not doing any kind of competitive play where players would come closer than 6 feet to each other. And then additionally, you know, the other important thing to call out is we're in the red tier right now. You know, our cases continue to go up, though not as fast as other counties, and there's a chance we'll go to the purple tier. And if and when we do go to the purple tier, any kind of indoor sports would then be closed because it's contingent on the fitness, gyms and fitness being open indoors. So that would be a requirement from the state. I don't know, Kit or Celia, do you want to add anything about that, or Sandra?
So I was trying to find the answer for Kevin about the masks and age. I was looking at the sports FAQs from the state, and it's not talking about age, but with the CDC, they say that the cutoff age is 2. Anything under than 2, they don't wear them because there's a suffocation risk. But above 2, they're supposed to be wearing them. And that's for activity inside. If they're doing activity outside, you want them wearing their masks until they get to wherever the activity is taking place, right? And then they're putting their stuff down 6 feet apart. Then they take off their masks, keeping that social distance the entire time. And I know that can be particularly tough with kids. I work primarily with high school kids, and you can imagine how tough it is with them, but even with the younger ones, I can understand. I think what we can do is just try to encourage it and make it as positive as possible to help kind of facilitate that, that we are seeing our numbers increase. And so it's time to kind of dial down a little bit, get a little bit more focused in on those little day-to-day things so that we can get, you know, out of this surge a little bit faster than if we didn't.
Thank you.
The school guidance for masks is 3rd grade and above, required and recommended between the age of 2 and 3rd grade.
So let's see, do you, Celia, or do you have anything else, or should we just open it up for questions at this point?
I just wanted to mention that just to make sure that it's clear that we are seeing a lot of reports of parties and social gatherings that seem to be linked to many of our cases, much of our surge, and we're very concerned about this, about the Thanksgiving holiday that just occurred and what's going to happen in the next few weeks, and so you know, being able to participate in these wonderful sports teams is such a privilege and such a great thing for our kids, but we all have to work really hard, parents, teachers, parents, staff, and students, to make sure that we can maintain this privilege of attending these events.
So at this point, thank you so much, Celia. I just wanted to open it up for folks who might have questions, and I can look in the chat here, but also if we have a lot of folks on here, but if y'all have questions, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask questions. I see one here in the chat asking saying there's confusion on what's recommended by the health department and what is not legal. Be helpful to show what could result in a fine or arrest if not followed. So yeah, I mean, everything that's in that state guidance that's in our public health orders is a requirement. It's not just a recommendation. And so basically it could result in a fine or various penalties, but the state requirement that I just went over is the requirement for youth sports. Let's see if there's other questions.
I got a question on what if you're contacted that someone's child has a sore throat and is getting tested, do they have to report that? And no, you have to report if they're positive, but not if they're ill, if they're getting tested. We just want to know if they're positive. Just make sure that the kid who is ill does not come in, and follow those guidelines on when they come back, when they're safe to come back to your sports team. You just don't want to have them there while they're ill and possibly infecting others. I see here actually online as well, and perhaps I was unclear, I'm sorry, please clarify. You said no travel, but then gave guidelines, including a quarantine period after travel. What's the exact status on that? They're not supposed to travel. They're not supposed to go to Colorado and play in a sports tournament, or to Sacramento and play in a sports tournament. They're not supposed to. I guess I was kind of acknowledging that sometimes these things happen, and if they do, then the most responsible thing is quarantine and test, and they should not be anywhere. But no, that was not meant as an endorsement, or if it was, you're not supposed to. I'm just saying, if you do, please, because these whole schools go down on this. Whole cohorts at schools go down on these on kids that are positive in their schools. So it affects a lot of people.
Hi, sorry, I had a quick question of clarification. My name's Sarah. You talked about cases within sports teams. Can you clarify if there have been any cases in sports teams that are just within their own cohort, not traveling and just doing the 6 feet apart training, or are these teams that are traveled, which if there's, transfer within the team, how do we know that's from the actual play and not from the hotel or the restaurants or the travel? I guess that begs the question of whether or not even within their own cohort, if there hasn't been anything transferring, can play at least open up within a kid's, own team, own county, own cohort of 14 they've been with for 12 weeks or whatnot. So I guess clarification on that transmission that was mentioned.
Well, actually, Sarah, like that article said about the schools and the clubs that went up to Placerville County and went up there and they traced 30 back on various teams. That's obvious during play. That was a big team-centered thing. So that's kind of out there, not the norm, maybe. But even within our county, if it wasn't we've had a couple cases where if it wasn't on the team itself, they were exposed, it was carpooling to and from that team play. So yeah, it actually is happening between members on a team and multiple ages. The ones that went up to Placerville were high school age, and the ones that are in our county are 8 and 9 year olds. So it goes across the lines.
Okay, but it sounds like it's not the actual on the field, but it's in a car, in an enclosed space, or traveling together, but not the actual on the field, outdoor.
Well, what I'm saying is we really don't know, because how could we prove it?
Okay.
And I guess, I think that is one of the things that I've heard from our public health folks, is that one of the concerns around travel is there's a lot more off the field time when people are potentially together. And so that's why the guidance is not to travel. In terms of what's allowed, on the field, we still would have to follow the state. So, there's not really an ability within Marin County for us to change the guidance to allow, more competitive play or things like that. Even if we're not seeing cases in that type of activity locally. we'll have to follow the state, but I think we're expecting that the state will update its guidance sometime in the not too distant future.
And just to kind of speak to that, we have seen, not in California because we haven't had no competitive play, but across the United States, we have seen cases with competitive play that are transmissions along teams. So we have seen that. I get emails from the public health people all the time about that. So it is happening. We are seeing it. We're just not having it here because we're not allowing it. And that's the reason why we're not allowing it. But that's the idea, is we're trying to prevent it as much as possible so we can get to a safer space so that we can then start playing.
Thank you.
Let's see, and what other questions do we have?
So the maximum number of cohorts for a child to be included in is 3, and school does count as a cohort. So that's one question from Liz. So school counts as 1 and then 2 sports cohorts.
Was that tied to the tiers?
No, I don't believe the only thing with the youth sports guidance that I think is tied to the tiers is whether indoor is allowed, which, would not be allowed. And then the percentage at which it's allowed changes in the tiers.
And when we first started this, we started with, in purple tier, we started with, you could only be in 2 cohorts. And then we went to red and then down to orange, and they put it up to 3 cohorts. But when we went back to red, they left it at 3 cohorts. So if we go back to purple, they might change that again. But at this point, 3 cohorts is the standard for all.
Hey, I have a question, folks.
Yeah.
My name's Tom Evers. It's related, and I could use some advice on it because I'm going through it right now. It's kids returning from college, in-state and out-of-state. With the way some of the colleges are, they're back until the middle of January. Do we follow the same guidelines regardless if it's in-state, an in-state school or an out-of-state school, as far as the 7 days and the 14-day stay away or quarantine?
Yes,
Yes.
those are numbers from the CDC.
I just didn't know if, yeah, okay.
Yeah, maintaining the same quarantine numbers. Yes, and there's actually a question here to clarify on quarantine after travel and testing 5 to 7 days afterwards. The quarantine is 14 days, regardless of whether that test comes back positive or negative. That is correct. So a negative does not shorten the quarantine. It's still 14 days at this point for the CDC. And we have a question here. Is there a time length minimum for sports day camps or programs, such as San Francisco minimum program is 2 weeks? Sandra or Linda, is it?
No.
I've not heard of a minimum. There was a 3-week minimum during the day camps.
During the summer, there was some camp limitations, but now, no.
Well, we still have minimum length of cohorts. You can't just, right? People sign up for
No,
2 to 3 weeks at least.
There is no minimum time limit in the state's guidance or in any guidance that we have, but I think the idea is having an ongoing cohort. So I think, like, even though at this point there's no specific requirement in terms of that, the amount of time somebody's in it, I think the idea is having an ongoing cohort, not just sort of taking one-off classes.
No drop-ins.
I think the important word is a stable cohort.
Stable.
I'm getting a lot of questions about people traveling for like a 1-day, day camp kind of situation in sports. And they're saying, well, they're staying within a cohort, but that cohort's not a stable cohort. It's just 1 day. A stable cohort means that they're seeing each other again and again, and they're nice and stable within that group, that there's no changes, there's no intermixing of those households, which we consider high risk. So even though there might not be a minimum number of weeks per cohort, the idea is you want to keep that stable cohort, that's stable as much as possible.
That's
To the
well
point-
said.
Yeah, the point of a cohort is twofold. One is to, by restricting the people who are in that cohort, you restrict spread and transmission. And the second point of that is that it makes it easier to trace. Should someone become positive, it makes contact tracing that much easier. So that's important.
And here's a question. So do people who have already had the virus need to quarantine? I'd assume so, right? Since people can get infected more than once. But Celia, or
They have 90 days. If they have a laboratory confirmed case of COVID, not just they said that they had COVID or they thought they might have, but they had a positive test, then for 90 days, they don't have to quarantine and do the other things. After 90 days, they go back to being sort of a regular person as far as all the guidance goes.
I see a question about any progress on sport-specific guidance by tier. And yes, the handbook that we were talking about earlier that is going to be made public here soon is based upon tier. So each tier has its own handbook. It's color coded. Had a lot of fun picking out the colors. But then there are sport-specific guidance within that tier. So we went for every single sport that we could think of. What can you do safely within that tier based upon what's given to us by state guidance? And again, I think we're going to be getting more of that kind of guidance from state here soon, that with the emergency break that we went through a couple weeks ago, that's kind of the reason why I think they held it, was because they want to make sure that the numbers we stabilize a little bit before they release it, but we're going to see a little bit more sport specific guidance from that. And then we're including that within our own county guidance as well.
Like maybe there's like a sandbag thruster and then maybe there's
let's see, any more questions? Feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask a question if folks have them.
There's an interesting.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Stephen Pringle has a question. Santa Clara just shut down all sports. If we get to that point, can we consider smaller cohorts for training, like 4 to 6 groups, instead of just shutting it all down? I'm not sure what 4 to 6 groups means. Do you mean 4 to 6 children per group?
Yes, 4 to 6 kids per cohort.
I see.
Yeah, I mean, I think like at this point, we are just following the state guidance on youth sports. And we're actually just following state guidance on everything except that we've closed all indoor dining and indoor concessions in movie theaters and indoor food courts in malls. So aside from that, we're just following the state guidance. And I think it would be, unlikely at this point, unless things change pretty significantly, that we would, of course, it's obviously up to Dr. Willis, but whether that we would have guidance that was, largely different from the state, because mostly we're just following the state.
I see a question about, is there a specific distance from home field that can, that is travel? And the travel guidance that came out with holiday travel was outside the Bay Area, but I want us to be really aware that we are red and everyone else around us is purple. And so you just kind of have to think about, we're substantial, but they're widespread. So traveling outside our county is what's going to be considered as travel at this point, I would think, just because everybody else is so much more widespread than we are. We want to contain it versus traveling outside of it. And then I saw a question about cohort number limitations. We are following state cohort sizes, which is 14. So it's 14 kids or students or athletes and 2 coaches maximum. So if a school class size is 22, that would be separated into 2 separate cohorts.
And I see a question here, what's considered an exposure for a positive case or to a positive case? Is it closer than 6 feet for a certain amount of time? I think right, 6 feet for is it 15 minutes or something like that?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Over a period of 24 hours.
Thank you.
That's correct. And there's a question here that there have been no in-school transmissions among students, and have there been any transmissions in Marin youth sport cohorts to date? So from student to from people within a cohort, and not that I know of in the school sports group. Is that not so far?
But
We're
in
hoping to
youth-
keep it that way.
But in youth sports, I think there have, right? That's what precipitated this. No?
Yes, yeah, there is one, but we're not, we're like we said earlier, we don't know if it was a carpool going to the sports or if it was actually in the sports. They were on the same team, but nobody else on that team ended up positive.
It's hard to say for sure, definitively.
Thanks. Let's see. And there's another question here. Is whether or not multiple cohorts can be inside of a gym if it falls within the 10% or 25% capacity. Yeah, I think, if you look on not on the youth sports guidelines, but in the youth programs, it's like the youth cohort guidelines from the state. It kind of defines sort of how to separate spaces for different youth groups. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that, but it seems like there's a lot of different ways you could kind of break up the space. It seems like the important thing is that the different cohorts don't interact.
Yeah, I've been primarily working with the schools, and we've been trying to keep it as limited to one cohort as possible within an area. But if you're able to section it off really well, you are allowed to have more than one cohort in a gym as long as you're staying within that fire code 10%, 25%. I think, for example, like volleyball or basketball, you don't want the balls changing between cohorts because they're touching their masks, touching the ball, right? They're not supposed to be touching their masks, but they do. Then they're touching the ball rolls over, someone else picks it up, tosses it over, they rub their face, so it's trying to limit as much of that interaction as possible. And with athletics, we do have equipment. So if you're in a gym, you're in a facility indoors, you want to keep as safe as possible. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions.
There's one here. Not all sports present the same amount of risk. Lap swimming represents less risk than a ball sport. Will that be considered if things get worse? Yeah, I would anticipate, I think the state is sort of taking the lead and is coming out with some updated guidance. But if there was any reason that Marin was coming up with specific guidance, that likewise, all those things would be considered. I think the intent, at least from our standpoint in Marin, is trying to keep the community safe while, providing the most opportunities for businesses to, continue doing business. And then all of you providing really important, meaningful exercise and mental health for our community who has been cooped up and needs to get outside and play. Let's see. I see a question here about who's responsible for enforcement of these rules and guidance. Is there any, or is it up to individual organizations, individuals? I think, really want to reach out to all of you to, follow this guidance and answer your questions. And it's up to all the individuals, but of course, the county or local cities or towns can also take enforcement action with any business as well.
Lee had a question that she put in the chat that was a little bit earlier about who we should get in contact with if we wanted to work with you guys to come up with guidelines for a whole league. We're both part of the Marin Swim League. And so we're supposed to start our season, in the spring, but like, what does that look like? Who could we reach out to within your organization to kind of come up with what are those specific guidelines for an entire league? Did I rephrase that correctly for you?
You did.
Okay.
It's
and I think, Kit, it sounds like Kit's been working on something that's, and maybe you can describe what you've been working on. I think in terms of the actual required legal guidance, we're trying not to have county specific guidance. So there's whereas earlier, like in April, we could plug folks in. We had a working group of folks working on the Marin specific guidance. Now, really, that's happening at the state level. And so, I think the recommendation is if you want to influence the state guidance, if there's a statewide, organization that you're part of, that may be the best way to influence the state guidance, or reaching out to your local assembly member or state senator.
I will volunteer myself a little bit. You can go ahead and reach out to me. I didn't kind of introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Christian, or Kit Holston. I'm the supervisor of athletic training at Marin Health. I'm a certified athletic trainer. I am a part of the Marin County Athletic Training Task Force. And I've been working with public health in regards to high school youth sports for the last couple months. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I will help give as much guidance as I can. And I know, especially with the state guidance coming out here soon, you can always feel free to reach out to me, and I will help either steer you in the right direction or help kind of answer your questions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kit, not sure if it's come up yet, but and I don't know if anybody's on the call for adults since we're focusing on youth, but I think we've already provided some pretty good framework for protocols for a softball league for adults. So we've given that to Max, and I'm happy to share it with you directly too, if you'd like that.
Sure, go ahead. I think when my understanding is that the sports guidance coming out from the state, and Linda, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you were in that meeting, not I. It's sports guidance for everybody. So youth, high school, and adult. The only thing that it does not apply for is colleges and professionals. They have their own because they're special. But that guidance will be for adults as well as youth. So yes, feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions.
That's great news.
I see another question here that if teams are following the 6-foot rule and outdoors, do those kids all need to quarantine if the teammate is positive? Is that considered close contact? And that's the thing of these are considered cohorts. Yes, they all get closed as the schools get closed. And as the entire school cohort goes down, so will these private sports organizations cohorts go down as well if somebody tests positive.
And that's really because we're trying to be extra careful, and we really don't know what those kids on the same team are doing when you're not looking. So we're just going to not point fingers, and the cohort closes and quarantines.
And as we're getting close to 3 o'clock here, we probably have time for 1 or 2 more questions, but looks like Kit just put her contact info into the chat. And then maybe we can put the COVID-19 contact info in there too, for folks who have specific questions or follow-up, or the best way to connect. And then actually, if other folks who are on this call, if we did another one of these, and I never got everybody's contact info. So if folks are interested in follow-up calls, if you want to put your contact info into the chat, and then we can capture that to reach back out to you if we have a follow-up call. And again, we can take another question or two, but I just want to say thank you to all of you for being part of this and helping to keep our community safe.
Yes, thank you very much for participating, and we do look forward to continued partnership. We know there's going to be a lot of questions, and you are welcome to reach out. There will be more guidance coming out soon, hopefully from the state, and we'll just do our best to keep you all informed. And thank you for exercising our kids. It's super important.
I saw one question here about sort of asking, what about for teams that have kids that I think it was from Michelle. It sounded like teams that have kids from Marin and and other counties as well. How does that work? And I would assume that the recommendation would be that that's, that I guess, man, is that allowed? You know, I think like, of course,
What do we
I
do?
don't
Why
know.
was everyone putting their emails in there?
Yes, if folks want to put their emails, that's great.
Max, I was thinking about that question
Yeah.
as well. I mean, we have kids coming into school from other counties as well. It currently happens. I would I would say again to remember that other counties are having greater transmission than we are right now, and that would not be optimum. But I also don't, Celia, I mean, we wouldn't tell people you can't.
I don't think we're banning anybody. I think it's just, you know, being cognizant that, you know, there's different risk levels and just being super diligent with your symptom checking, you know, every day, every time they come in, and to be aware that there's some people who are at a higher risk.
I would also really, parents need to be so accountable for monitoring their kids' health and health and not sending them, you know, to be aware of what's my kid like regularly and, oh, my kid looks different today and is not doing that well. So they should not go participate in an activity like that. And, you know, if you can really reinforce with your parents that you need their assistance in helping the whole community to stay safe, I think we're all better off.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. I'll keep the recording on for just a minute to make sure I capture everyone's emails who wants to be on the list. And just want to say thank you to Kit and Celia and Sandra and Marcia and Linda and the whole team for your work. And thank you to all of you for your partnership and help with this.
Max, I saved the chat and maybe we can parse through it and put questions that perhaps did not get answered into some groups and get some solid answers.
That sounds great, Marcia.
That'd be
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you, Marcia. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for having this. You know, it's been a hot button item for us as we get more and more referrals about kids with travel and kids on teams. And we really do need everybody's help.
Yeah, thank you.
And I want to swim too this spring. So let's get there.
Well,
Okay.
I want to be back on the like soccer field doing athletic training. I miss it like crazy right now. So we all want to get there.
All right.
Thanks again, Max.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.